Oda is an average high schooler, so average in fact that half of his classmates forgot that he was even here in the first place. He spends most of his time just reading isekai novels by himself, and the reason he is always alone isn't because he's being bullied or anything, he just prefers it this way. The idea of someone coming over to talk to him is always so anxiety-inducing that it's easier to just blend in and be invisible. All of a sudden, the room goes dark as a black sphere appears in the middle of the classroom and a summoning circle is formed right above everyone in class. In the next moment, they find themselves in the middle of a large hall. An old bald dude gets their attention and says the king has something important to tell them. The students are understandably upset about the interdimensional kidnapping, so they start demanding to know what the meaning of this is. But the advisor couldn't care less about their concerns, so he tells them all to shut up and pay attention. Once they are all quiet, the king speaks up and introduces himself as Morrigan, the ruler of the kingdom of Redis. He tells them all of the kingdom is under attack by demons, and only the power of a hero from another world is strong enough to defeat the demon lord. After hearing those words, Oda realizes this is the exact same scenario as all those isekai novels he had been reading, and he's actually starting to look forward to this a little. The advisor then states that it is time to identify the hero among them, so he invites everyone to place their hands upon this crystal ball so he can inspect their statuses. The first one up is Daisuke, so he walks up to the ball and is told to say the word status to display his stats. He was hoping that he might be the hero, but it turns out that he's just an animal trainer with an average power of 450. The advisor tells him there's no need to be disappointed since he is still only level 1, but his stats already far exceed those of an average person in this world. A few of the other students get classes like a disenchanter, a knight, and even a healer, and the advisor is pleased with the diverse range of strong skills the summoned students have. He also informs the students that they can open a personal status window by saying status on their own, and when Oda tries it out, he discovered that he's an assassin. That doesn't come as a huge surprise to him considering his personality, but something he does find concerning is the fact that his stats are abnormally high. Earlier, Daisuke had stats around 450, and the advisor said that was already much higher than average people in this world, but Oda's stats are at 1,800. So what's with the massive disparity? It's Tsukasa's turn on the crystal ball next, so he places his hand on it, and to his surprise, he finds out that he is the hero. The other students aren't all that surprised by this outcome since Tsukasa has always been a prodigy in athletics, academics, and leadership, so he was the most likely to become a hero. The advisor begins praising him for having such high stats since most people cap out around 500 points, but his are around 900. However, if 900 is really all a hero gets, then Oda is even more confused by the state of his own stat screen because it makes no sense for his stats to be so damn high. Nanase asks Oda if he'd like to go next since there aren't many people left, but the idea of revealing his stats to everyone here scares him because he has read enough isekai to know that there's something off about the king and his daughter. He can't even be certain that they were telling the truth about the demon lord they mentioned earlier, so revealing his stats to them would put him at a serious disadvantage. However, simply saying he doesn't want to show his stats would draw too much attention, so he looks at his stat screen and realizes that he has a max-level skill called Presence Concealment, and as soon as he activates it, he practically vanishes from the group without anyone noticing. Even Nanase, who was talking to him just a moment ago, completely forgets about Oda's existence as soon as he is out of sight, just like my dad. Once the advisor has taken note of everyone's ability, he tells them that equipment for their training will be provided soon, but for now, they will be taken to the bedrooms that have been prepared for them. Oda breathes a sigh of relief. He passed the verification unnoticed, so now all that's left is for him to use his skills to gather information. But as he's walking through the halls, he notices a camera spying on the students from the ceiling, and now he's absolutely certain that something nefarious is going on here. Since no one knows he's here anymore, he's going to have to fend for himself until he can figure things out, and fortunately, he manages to find an old bedroom that the castle uses to store equipment, so he decides to spend the night here. He looks through the available gear and finds some stuff that would suit an assassin, so he puts it on and heads out so he can start gathering as much info as possible. Thanks to his high stats, he is easily able to leap hundreds of feet into the air, so getting around won't be an issue for him. And with his concealment ability, he effortlessly sneaks into the king's room undetected and overhears him talking to the princess about some kind of plan. Morrigan also reminds her to make sure she doesn't let any of the students go into the castle's archive, because it'd be bad if they were to learn the truth. Oda still doesn't know what exactly their plan is, but he can tell that it's not something good, so he is tempted to just stab the king to death right here and end it once and for all. But doing that would be too reckless, at least not until he has gathered more info. The next morning, Oda sneaks into the dining hall and grabs a piece of bread to eat. He contemplates whether he should undo his concealment and tell his classmates that the king is up to no good, but he doubts they would believe him. Just then, Tsukasa walks in and he has something he wants to say. It's clear that they became stronger by coming to this world, and he feels like it is their duty to use their newfound power to help defeat the demon lord just like the king asked them to. So he would like to ask for everyone's support in achieving that goal, and they all seem to be on board with the idea. Oda realizes that the fact that they all see the king and princess as allies means there's no way they'd believe him if he told them about what he overheard last night, so he decides to gather some more information before doing anything else. Later that day, the students all gather outside for their first combat lessons, and they are introduced to Saren Mithray, the Knight Commander of Redis's last battalion. He says he will be in charge of training them for the next month, and after that, they will be allowed to go into the dungeon to try out their new skills. Oda has been watching from around the corner for a while now, and he's not happy about how blindly enthusiastic his classmates are about becoming heroes, but there's nothing he can do about it in his current situation, so he decides to go gather more intel. However, as he is leaving, Saren seems to notice him, so he puts his assistant, Jill, in charge of the students and follows Oda out. Oda eventually stops as a fountain and wonders where he should go to gather intel, but all of a sudden, Saren appears behind him and asks if something is wrong. Oda is shocked that someone was able to spot him since he's sure his concealment skill is still active, but Saren tells him he doesn't have to worry too much because his skill is still effective on everyone else, but he is a bit of a special case. Saren possesses enchanted eyes that allow him to see minor temperature changes, so noticing Oda wasn't difficult. Oda can't risk having his cover blown, so he reaches for his dagger intending to take Saren out, but Saren tells him there's no need for that because he isn't going to tell the king or princess about him. Oda is surprised to hear that since he figured the Knight Commander would be loyal to the king, but Saren's loyalty is a bit complicated, so as things stand, he's got no reason to snitch on Oda. He and Oda sit down by the entrance, and Oda tells Saren that he has been trying to find a way to get into the archives because he knows nothing about magic or how this world works. For example, his concealment skill was maxed out from the start, but he has no idea how to level up any of his other skills. Saren offers to teach him how to level up since he wouldn't find that info in the archives even if he tried. Oda is getting a little excited because he has been hoping that he'd get a chance to do some real assassin training, but he doesn't like accepting help for free, so he asks Saren if there's anything he can do for him in return. Saren says he'd just like to hear a bit about what Oda's homeworld is like since he thinks it'll be interesting to learn about, so the two officially start working together. Over the next few weeks, Oda learns about this world's history and how there are separate continents with elves and beast folk out there. After that, Saren moves on to training Oda while Jill handles the training of the other heroes. Things have been going well for a while now, but one night Oda comes to meet with Saren because he found a strange book in the castle's archives. Saren already knows what this is about since he was the one who hid that book in there for Oda to find, and it contains details regarding a coup Saren is planning. He says the king is no longer fit to rule this land because he's willing to pay a horrific price for his own personal gain, and that doesn't sit well with Saren or the other knights, but they'd like to keep things as peaceful as possible to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Oda thinks things would have been a lot easier if he had just killed the king when he had the chance, but Saren tells him he made the right choice by sparing him in the moment. Killing a man is not an easy burden to bear, especially not for a teenager like him. Just because he is an assassin doesn't mean he is obligated to kill, and if he truly intends to return home someday, he should keep his killing to an absolute minimum. Oda appreciates Saren's advice, but he asks him why he has been looking out for him so much even though he stands to gain nothing. Saren says he has high hopes for Oda, and he's not just talking about his stats. When he was first summoned, Oda was the only one who actually thought things through and didn't just go with the flow. Plus, there aren't many who could endure what Oda has been through and come out stronger. Oda gets a little embarrassed since he has lived his entire life being ignored by everyone around him, and this is the first time someone has ever actually praised him so much. Saren is glad it made him happy, but he does have a favor to ask of him since he could really use some help with the planned coup, and Oda says he will consider it. By the end of the month, the training of the heroes is finally over, so it is time for them all to head down into the dungeon. But while they are being paraded through the streets, Oda notices someone who has been glaring at them from the sidelines, and he wonders why she holds such animosity towards the heroes, so he sneaks up behind her to ask. The girl is startled by Oda's sudden appearance, but he assures her that he means no harm. He just wants to know why she seems so hostile towards the heroes when all the other people seem to support them. The girl asks him if he really doesn't know what the kingdom has to sacrifice to summon them here. But this is Oda's first time hearing of any sacrifice, so he's not sure what she's talking about. She could have easily told him what it was, but instead she tells Oda he should find out the answer for himself since this won't be the last time they see each other. As the party heads into the dungeon, they are forced to battle their way through a large group of orcs, but no matter how many they kill, even more always end up appearing. Tsukasa suggests they should all retreat for now, and Saren agrees since they've made enough progress for today, so he uses his divine sword skill to clear a path to the exit and tells everyone to run as fast as they can. However, after walking through the door, they find themselves cornered by even more monsters, so their chances of escaping are looking slim. Just then, Tsukasa remembers that before they came out on this mission, the princess had given him a special smoke bomb which she said would scare monsters away, so he decides to give it a shot and tosses it at the orcs. But to his horror, the smoke bomb actually turns the orc into a minotaur that's much stronger than anything they've faced so far. By the time Oda and Jill arrive, the party is already on the verge of defeat, so Oda springs into action and tries stabbing it in the back of the neck, but its hide is way too tough for him to pierce, so his sword shatters on impact. Oda is forced to fall back and finds Tsukasa kneeling on the floor with a broken arm. He's in the middle of a serious mental breakdown because he can't handle the fact that he's not strong enough to defeat the Minotaur on his own. Oda knows Tsukasa has a strong sense of responsibility, but he has never been one to crumble under pressure like this, so he gets the feeling that somebody did something to him. He asks the party's disenchanter to try casting Dispel Curse on him to see what happens, and sure enough, the remnants of a curse are seen floating off his head, so someone definitely planned this whole attack and Oda has a good idea of who's behind it. While Tsukasa's curse is being dispelled, Oda tells Saren that he plans to give his new skill a try, so Saren launches a flash of lightning at the Minotaur, and as it is being electrocuted, Oda activates his shadow magic. Dark tendrils begin to emerge from the shadows before piercing the Minotaur where it stands. Once it has been restrained, Oda begins pulling it into the shadows until its entire body is devoured, leaving only its head behind. However, while he may have successfully killed the Minotaur, he still doesn't have full control over his shadow powers, so he begins struggling to keep them from going out of control. Fortunately, Saren comes to his aid to help him remain calm until he is eventually able to withdraw the tendrils. After the battle is over, everyone returns to the castle, and Saren congratulates Oda on a successful mission. It's thanks to him that everyone managed to make it home safely, but while his shadow skill may be incredibly powerful, it also takes a massive toll on him, so Saren tells Oda to avoid using it unless absolutely necessary. He tells Oda that he has a gift for him, so he hands him a katana. He says the blade was forged by the first hero who was summoned centuries ago, and Oda is grateful for it, but he wonders why Saren is giving it to him instead of the current hero of Tsukasa. Saren explains that Tsukasa was already given a holy sword to use in battle, plus the king would definitely notice that something was wrong if he saw Tsukasa wielding the katana since Saren kind of stole it from the royal armory. Oda understands, so he accepts the katana, and he thinks it's cool that he gets to use the same sword as the former hero. But speaking of heroes, he recalls that the situation with Tsukasa hasn't gotten any better. They were able to figure out that he was cursed, but while some of the symptoms were alleviated by the disenchantment spell, the curse itself still persisted, and Oda plans to find out why. Later that night, Oda sneaks into the princess's room and finds her in the middle of strengthening the curse on Tsukasa with a magic crystal and turning him into a puppet, but before she could finish her spells, Oda takes action and slices the crystal in half. This should take care of the curse for now, but he still has a few questions he'd like to ask her, so he points his sword at her throat and demands to know why she is doing this. The princess coldly says that everything she does is for the sake of the king, so he asks her why she is following his orders, but upon closer inspection, he notices that there's not a single original thought going on behind those eyes. She's obviously being controlled as well, and it wouldn't be right to kill her if she's not doing this of her own free will, so Oda simply leaves. However, he probably should have taken her out anyway because as soon as he is gone, she goes into her closet full of cursed crystals for each of his classmates and begins using those instead. A little while later, Oda takes the crystals to Saren and asks if he knows anything about it. Saren has definitely seen these crystals before, and he mutters to himself that he can't believe the king hasn't given up on this yet. That aside, he asks Oda if he revealed himself to the princess while he destroyed the crystal, and he admits that he did, but only because he wanted to find out what she's thinking and why she's doing all this. Saren tells him that the princess is nothing more than a puppet for the king at this point, but Oda has done enough for today, so Saren says he should go to sleep. But he advises Oda not to rest on castle grounds any longer. The princess is definitely going to try cursing everyone aside from Tsukasa now, but she doesn't know who Oda is, so she has no control over him. She may not know exactly who he is, but now that she is aware that there is an assassin on castle grounds, Saren is sure the guards will spend the night searching every nook and cranny, so Oda won't be able to hide in storage closets anymore. Oda apologizes for revealing himself without thinking of the consequences, but Saren tells him there's no need to apologize. Making mistakes is a natural part of youth, so it's Saren's job as an adult to help him handle the aftermath. Oda says he is grateful that he has someone like Saren looking out for him. And Saren says that if he really wants to express his gratitude, then Oda should bring him along once he finally finds a way to return to Japan. Oda spends the night out in one of the trees, but he is woken up when he hears a huge commotion early in the castle. He wonders what could possibly be going on so early in the morning, so he heads over to take a look. He finds a few guards and his classmates gathered around, and once Tsukasa spots him approaching, he is relieved to see Oda again. Oda is glad to see that the curse on Tsukasa was broken, but Tsukasa looks panicked and asks him where he has been. Oda explains that he was just taking a nap and asks what's going on here. He had expected something mundane, but to his horror, he found Commander Saren lying on the floor with a dagger through his chest. Oda breaks down and asks who could do such a thing. But suddenly, all of his classmates turn on him, accusing him of being the killer. The dagger in Saren's chest is the same one they saw Oda using just a day ago. That would be compelling evidence against him, but they literally saw his dagger shatter against the Minotaur in the dungeon, so this one couldn't be his. Even so, his classmates all say he is way too suspicious because he is always disappearing and appearing whenever he wants. Oda realizes that the princess must have successfully cursed all of his classmates for them to be acting this way, so the only one who is still normal is Tsukasa. He tries sticking up for Oda since it's not fair to accuse him of murder without any evidence, but all of a sudden, the king shows up and announces that Oda is being charged with treason for the murder of Commander Saren, so he orders the guards to execute him immediately. Oda sees a smile flash across the princess's face, and in that moment, he realizes that he is being set up, so no amount of explaining will be enough to get him out of this mess. As the guards are about to stab him, he activates his concealment skill and disappears from view, so the king orders his men to spread out and search everywhere for him. In the meantime, Oda sneaks up next to Jill since he knows he is trustworthy. And once he gets Jill's attention, he is informed that the real culprits behind Saren's death were the king's personal assassins, and now they'll be coming after Oda next, so he's going to have to go on the run. Jill explains that Saren had anticipated something like this happening, so he prepared a bag of supplies ahead of time for Oda to use. Oda thanks Jill for the information, and after gathering the provisions, he leaves the kingdom. That night, the king and princess meet to discuss the plan's progress, and the king is honestly surprised by how easy it was to take out Saren, but it's a good thing the assassins were able to deal with him quickly. The princess has also finished applying curses to all the students aside from Tsukasa, so now they just need some sort of justification to start a war with the nation of the East. The king says the students will be useful pawns for him in the war, and as for the one who managed to get away, he's sure a kid like him wouldn't be able to survive on his own out there, but just to be safe, he tells the princess to send the Night Raven assassins after him. Meanwhile, Oda has just arrived at the dungeon since Saren once told him it's the best place to hide out if you're on the run. Practically no one would bother searching a dungeon just to find you, so it should be safe in there, but water and food are limited, so Oda needs to be careful. Even with Oda's concealment skill, there are still a lot of monsters down there that can detect him with their heightened smell or hearing, but as Oda's assassin class levels up, he will eventually be able to mask his scent, the sound of his footsteps, and even his heat signature, until he becomes truly undetectable. There are bosses every 10 levels, and once you enter a boss room, you won't be able to leave unless you kill the boss, so going in alone is a risky gamble, but it's not like he has much of a choice if he wants to progress further. As soon as he steps inside, he is immediately confronted by a chimera, and while he is able to dodge its strikes at first, he gets caught off guard when its snake tail starts spitting venom, so he gets hit in the leg. As a result of the damage, he can't move as fast as he did before, so the chimera is able to pierce his back with its claws. But just as it was about to finish him off, Oda decided to use his trump card and cast shadow magic to completely obliterate the chimera. He successfully defeated the first dungeon boss, but the injuries he suffered, combined with the exhaustion from using the shadow skill, left him in critical condition. The shadow skill recognizes that there's a risk of its master dying, so while Oda is still unconscious, it automatically switches from attack to recovery mode and begins healing his wounds. Meanwhile, back at the castle, Tsukasa has just asked everyone to leave the castle with him. They ask if he's saying he wants to go hunt the Demon King right now, and that sounds like a good excuse, so Tsukasa goes with that, but his classmates all tell him to shut up and sit back down because they aren't going anywhere. He realizes that their behavior must be an effect of the curse that Saren told him about before he was killed, and if it's true that all of his classmates are being mind-controlled, then he's just going to have to leave on his own. However, to his surprise, a few of his classmates actually do agree to leave with him, and a few hours later, they are all standing outside the city limits. They're surprised that they managed to get out so easily, but it makes sense since their excuse was that they wanted to fight the Demon Lord, and it wouldn't make sense for the king to stop them from completing their mission. That aside, Tsukasa wonders why the others chose to join him when everyone else refused to even consider it, so Yuki tells him that she doesn't think anyone here is currently afflicted by the princess's curse. Asakina adds that he thinks his actions might have played a part in breaking them free from the curse, since even though he's not sure why he did it, he has fuzzy memories of himself sneaking into the princess's room and shattering a bunch of crystals in there. We later find out that Jill was the one responsible for it because he used his manipulation skill to take control of Asakina's body in order to undo the curse. And even if he was only able to break a few of the students free, he is glad he managed to fulfill Saren's last wish. As the group leaves the kingdom, Asakina thinks to himself that he needs to find a way to reconnect with Oda somehow. He wishes he had tried to find him while he was still staying hidden within the castle, and regardless of the fact that he was cursed, he feels terrible about not standing up for his friend. Most people in class never really spoke to Oda much, but one day, while walking home from school, Asakina happened to run into Oda while he was working a construction job. This was the first time they had met outside school, so Oda asked him to keep his job a secret since he didn't want his little sister to find out about it. Asakina promised to keep the secret since he knows what it's like to look after a little sister. And it just so happened that both of their sisters were best friends, so they had a good laugh about the coincidence. Meanwhile, down in the dungeon, Oda has just regained consciousness, and for some reason he recalls having a dream about the day he met Asakina. He really hopes Asakina is doing alright, and he is just as worried about his mom and sister back in Japan, but after he is done worrying, he suddenly comes to the realization that he isn't in excruciating pain even though he got his back clawed out by the chimera. He calls out for his status screen, and from what he can see, his stats went up a lot from defeating the chimera, but that doesn't explain why his HP is almost full despite all the damage he took in that fight. He also notices that his shadow magic skill is now level 3, and he doesn't understand how it could have gone up so much after he only used it once, but he has no time to think about it. Therefore, he decides to keep moving. Further down in the dungeon, he ends up running into a giant slime, and after cutting it open, he finds a pretty elf girl inside. He thinks this is the perfect opportunity to try out one of the new skills he got from leveling up, World's Eye. He activates the skill, and all at once, Every bit of information about the girl's life comes flooding into Oda's mind, but it's way too overwhelming for him to process it all, so he cancels the skill halfway. The girl barely has 2% of her HP left, so Oda carries her up to the 69th floor and sets her down by a pool of water so she can rest. She later wakes up and Oda hands her some water to drink to make her feel better. He tells Emilia she should get some more sleep so she can recover properly, but she says she's too hungry to sleep, so he makes her a bowl of porridge. The girl is grateful for the food and starts eating right away. After she's done eating, she asks Oda how she got here since she remembers being further down in the dungeon, and he explains that this was the closest watering hole, so he carried her up. She's surprised that he went out of his way to look after her even though they've never met before, because that's the nicest thing anyone has ever done for her. A few hours later, Emilia is back to full strength and she and Oda have made it all the way down to the 80th floor, but Oda wonders why she is following him since he assumed that she would want to return to the surface as soon as possible. Emilia tells him she came down here to clear the dungeon just like him, so she's not leaving until she has accomplished her goal. The two make their way into the floor boss room, and the second they set foot inside, they are attacked by a dragon. They both jump out of the way, and Emilia uses gravity magic to weigh the dragon down while Oda goes for a finishing blow. However, the dragon was somehow able to locate him and swats Oda out of the air. Emilia tells him that the dragon is probably tracking his mana signature, so he should diffuse it into the surroundings, but Oda has no idea how to do that, so he does the next best thing and uses pure mana to launch an attack at the dragon before stabbing it to death through the eyes. The dragon falls to the ground defeated, but Emilia is confused by what Oda just did, so he explains that he didn't know how to diffuse his mana into the surroundings, so he just used the surrounding mana to attack instead. Emilia is shocked to learn that he is capable of such a thing, but before she could ask for more information, the dragon corpse suddenly begins glowing. After a few seconds, the dragon turns into a cat, but they are still wary of it, so Emilia scans its status and finds out that it's a shapeshifter, not a real dragon. That explains why they were able to defeat it so easily, since a real dragon would have mopped the floor with them in a fight. All of a sudden, the cat wakes up and it starts complaining about how humiliating it is that she lost to a human. Oda is surprised to hear the cat talking since he didn't know monsters could speak, but the cat scoffs and tells him she's no ordinary monster. She was personally created by the Demon Lord and bestowed high intelligence, so she is much more sophisticated than a regular monster. She just wanted to have a little fun by role-playing as a dragon, but she took it too far and it cost her the fight. She tells Oda that he is free to kill her if he wants, but first, she has a message from the Demon Lord that she needs to relay to him. The message is basically inviting Oda to visit the Demon Lord's castle, but Oda doesn't understand why the Demon Lord would want to see him, or how he even knows of Oda's existence in the first place. The cat tells him she's just as clueless as he is when it comes to the Demon Lord's plans, but her duty is done, so she lies down on the ground and tells Oda he can start killing her now. Oda tells her he's not going to do that because while the cat may be a demon, he doesn't necessarily think she's evil. Plus, he has a soft spot for cats, so he'd rather avoid brutally murdering one. The cat reminds him that the boss's room doors won't open unless someone dies, and she doubts he want to spend the rest of his life trapped, but Oda insists that he will find another way. Emilia speaks up and mentions that there might be a workaround for this, since if Oda were to make the cat his familiar, then she would no longer count as the floor boss and the doors would open. However, there's a catch. The pact ritual requires extremely precise mana control, and if Oda messes it up, there's a chance that both he and the cat could perish. Oda doesn't even flinch and says he's fine with the risk, but that makes no sense to Emilia, so she asks him why he is so willing to die over a cat he just met. He says it's just something he decided to do, so he's going to see it through to the end, and the cat really doesn't care either way, so she tells Oda he's free to do whatever he wants. Oda asks Emilia to explain how the ritual is meant to be performed, so she tells him that first she needs to give the cat a name. He thinks about it for a bit until he eventually comes up with the name Night. He chose that name because the cat's fur reminds him of the beautiful night sky and she kind of likes the name, but she acts like she doesn't care. Oda then asks Emilia what the next step of the ritual is, so she tells him he's going to need to pour his mana into the cat to bond their souls together. She thinks Oda should be able to pull it off, but she does warn him that once he starts, there's no going back, so if he fails to do it on the first try, he will die. Oda tells her there's nothing to worry about because he's sure he can handle it, and she trusts him. So he begins pouring mana into Night, and a bubble forms around them as Oda is dried into Night's soul. At first, things seem peaceful here, but he suddenly finds himself falling over a city facing imminent destruction. And the one responsible for all that destruction was none other than Night. This is one of her memories of the countless calamities she has caused over her long lifetime, but before she can cause any more damage, Oda reached out and yelled for her to stop. This gets Night's attention, so she directs a blast towards Oda, sending him crashing onto a roof and leaving him slightly injured. Night tells Oda to draw his blade and kill her here and now, because if he doesn't, he's going to lose his life, and dying here would render him a vegetable in real life. She's trying to force Oda to retaliate by attacking him with everything she has, and in the real world, Emilia sees Oda begin to bleed out his ears as his soul takes damage. Back in the soul world, Oda begins charging straight for Knight, but just when she thought he was about to strike her down, he instead let himself be impaled on her claws because he doesn't want to kill her. Knight doesn't understand what Oda is trying to pull here, since all he had to do to survive was end her life, but he says that's not good enough for him. He knows Knight doesn't really want to kill him, or anyone for that matter, but be that as it may, Knight says it doesn't matter because she's a monster. Oda says there's no rule saying she needs to kill humans just because she's a monster, but Knight tells him it's a primal instinct. Oda can tell that Knight hates living like this, so he tells her that as long as she's with him, he's going to take care of her, so her days of senseless destruction are over. This finally gets through to Knight, so she decides to trust Oda and settles down in his arms. Back in the real world, Oda nearly passes out from exhaustion, but Amelia catches him and with a look of relief, she tells him he was successful. Oda then goes up to Knight and places his hand on her head. A pattern appears on the back of his hand to symbolize his bond with Knight, and at the same time, the pattern on Knight's forehead changes from red to gold. Knight tells Oda that he has piqued her interest and she would like to stay by his side and witness his journey, so she swears her undying fealty to him. All of a sudden, a teleportation circle begins glowing on the ground, and the fact that it has appeared means Meg is no longer considered a boss by the labyrinth, so they are free to leave. Oda thinks it's great that they are free to go, but Meg is still weakened from her injuries earlier, so he tells her she can rest for as long as she needs because other monsters won't be able to get in here. In that case, Amelia suggests they should all sit down and have a nice chat so they can get to know each other while they wait, and Knight agrees. Meanwhile, back with Oda's classmates, they have just arrived at the city of Yamato, and since this place was founded by the summoned hero a few generations back, it has a lot of Japanese aesthetics. They pay for Nin and all sit down to discuss their current situation. Tsukasa tells everyone that their funds are running low, so they need to find work soon so they can keep covering their expenses. One of his classmates raises his hand and suggests they could all become adventurers to make money since they ran into a bunch of them on the way here. Tsukasa thinks that's a great idea, but aside from their money troubles, he is also concerned about the fact that they still know almost nothing about this world. They can't exactly trust what they've been told by the king and the princess, so he tells everyone to read as many books as they can to piece together this world's history. They all agree with his plan, but they doubt that reading a bunch of books is going to help much since their main goal is to find a way to get back to Japan, and they doubt they are going to find the answer in a random book. Tsukasa has already thought of that, so he tells them that he thinks the fastest way for them to make it back home is to play the part of heroes and slay the Demon King. The king was the one who summoned them here, so naturally he would know how to send them back, and once they've defeated the Demon Lord, regardless of what evil plans he may have in mind, he would be forced to send them back home. For now, he tells everyone that they need to gather as much money and info as possible. And once they have that, he suggests they should head straight for the Demon Continent to challenge the Demon Lord. However, Asahina objects to that plan. He says the best course of action would be to stay out and wait to meet up with Oda since he's bound to show up in the city sooner or later. Oda is without a doubt the strongest out of all of them here, so Asahina thinks it would be foolish to challenge the Demon Lord without his strength. Nanase agrees because he never really got a chance to speak to Oda before, but Daisuke strongly opposes the idea because he still thinks there's a chance that Oda was the one who killed Commander Saren. Asahina tells him they've already discussed this before, but the king used magic to manipulate their memories to turn them against Oda. So despite what Daisuke may remember, Oda is completely innocent. Be that as it may, Yuki says Oda is nowhere near here right now, and even if he were, there's no guarantee that he'd want to help them after everything he has been put through. Since Tsukasa is the leader, Shiori asks him whether he thinks they should wait for Oda or press on without him. Tsukasa thinks about it for a minute, and he sees why Asahina would want to wait for Oda since he is a trustworthy friend, and he is a lot stronger than the rest of them. But he doesn't think Oda would want to team up with them. He's always been someone who likes to do things on his own, and with the power difference between him and the rest of the class, they would only be slowing him down. That's why he suggests they should all train as hard as they can so that they can catch up to Oda's level of strength, and only after that will they be ready to challenge the Demon Lord. Back in the dungeon, Amelia tells the story of how she was betrayed by her people and hunted down until she was eventually cornered on the edge of a cliff. She asked her sister and her people why they were doing this to her since up till that point, she had never done anything that would warrant such hatred from them. But her sister had no real answer, she just said they wanted Amelia to die. With no other choice, Amelia used her gravity magic to destroy the ground beneath her feet and send herself plunging into the waters below to escape her attacker, and by the time she woke up, she found herself on the shore of a distant and unfamiliar land. Shortly after that, she was swallowed by a dark slime, and the next thing she remembers after that is waking up next to Oda. Oda and Knight are surprised by how rough Amelia's situation is, but Knight is curious about the dark slime that swallowed Amelia up because slimes usually don't eat people. And even if this one did, she finds it hard to believe that Amelia survived in there so long without being digested. Either way, Amelia says she's grateful that the slime ate her because without it, she would never have gotten the chance to meet Oda. Oda asks her if she intends to return home eventually, but Amelia says she has no home to return to. He asks her if she has at least tried having a conversation with her sister about what happened, but considering the fact that Amelia's sister tried to kill her, I don't think talking things out is an option for her. Oda's stance on this is biased because he also has a little sister, but has never tried to kill him. He cares about her a lot, and at one point he worked overtime for weeks just so he could buy her a new phone since her old one was busted. Yui didn't seem pleased with the gift at the time, but not because she was ungrateful. It was because she didn't like the fact that Oda was putting himself through so much stress just to buy her a gift. Just then, their mom came out and told Yui not to give Oda such a hard time about it since he only pushes himself because he loves her. Yui still felt bad about Oda working so hard for her sake, but she appreciated the gesture, so she thanked him for always looking out for her. Oda really misses her and his mom, so he wants to return home as soon as possible, but before that, there's something he needs to do. Back in Japan, no one ever seemed to notice Oda, which is probably why his presence concealment is one of his strongest skills. However, Commander Saren paid attention to him, and Oda owes a lot of his growth to him. But then the king murdered him in cold blood just so they could frame Oda, and he refuses to let that transgression go unpunished. They are all arrested now, so Oda asks Might where the teleportation circle is going to take them. Unfortunately, she says she has no idea since there are only a few demons in the world who are capable of manipulating teleportation circles, and she isn't one of them. Amelia recalls hearing a rumor that teleportation circles send you to the place you most desire to go, and if there are multiple users, it will pick one person and send everyone to that person's destination. They all go through, and in the next moment, they find themselves in the middle of a large plain with a massive tree in the distance. To Oda, it is a pleasant surprise, but to Amelia, this is a horrifying turn of events because she recognizes that tree, and it means she is back in the Elven Kingdom. All of a sudden, an elf scouting in a tree nearby spots them and immediately fires an arrow at Amelia. Oda notices in time to pull her to safety, and afterwards he apprehends the elf and brings him down for interrogation. The elf says he was sent out here to investigate a strange blue light that suddenly appeared, but to his surprise he found the traitorous princess, and it was murder on sight from there. He then proceeds to insult Amelia with extreme malice, so Oda knocks him out, but that doesn't solve their problems because while the elf was talking, more elves showed up and surrounded them, including Amelia's sister. Before all this, Amelia's life was going pretty well. She was in line to become the next ruler of the Elf Kingdom, and she had a great relationship with her sister, or so she thought. Gradually, all her advisors and guards began to turn on her until one day, Kilika suddenly accused her of committing a heinous crime. And without investigating at all, the guards all concluded that Amelia must be guilty because she is a child of Blight. She was forced to flee the kingdom before Kilika, and the guards could capture her, and now that they are face to face again, she doesn't know what to do. She tries telling Kilika that she will leave on her own, so there's no need for violence, but Kilika is hell-bent on capturing Amelia. However, before Kilika could do anything, Oda steps in front of Amelia to protect her. Kilika asks Oda who he thinks he is to be interfering in the matters of elves, but he says he met Amelia a day ago and he happens to like her, so he won't let Kilika speak to her like that. He also noticed that Kilika keeps referring to Amelia as a criminal, so he asks what crime she actually committed, and to that, Kilika rolls down her sleeve to reveal a large bruise that runs all the way across her arm. She tells Oda that Amelia once poisoned her with a vial disguised as a potion, and even for a member of the royal family, harming another royal is completely unforgivable. Amelia defends herself and says what she gave Kilika really was a potion, but Kilika says no one is ever going to believe that. She then walks up to Oda and looks him right in the eyes. Amelia immediately realizes what Kilika is trying to do, so she warns Oda to get away from her, but it's already too late. Kilika laughs and declares that her mesmerized skill is already active, so Oda's heart now belongs to her, and that means Amelia has no more allies. Kilika was expecting to see an expression of pure hopelessness on Amelia's face, but instead what she sees is rage. Amelia yells at Kilika to undo her spell and apologize to Oda because he should be allowed to make his own decision on who he loves. Seeing Amelia so angry really startles Kilika because she has always known her sister to be a spineless pushover, but right now she looks like she's ready to rip someone's throat out. Just then, Oda speaks up and tells Amelia to calm down because he's not under the control of any spell, and that's because mental type skills like Mesmerize only work effectively on people who are weaker than you. Kilika refuses to believe that a bumpkin like Oda is actually stronger than her, and he doesn't really care what she thinks of him. But he does care about what people think of Amelia, so he tells Kilika that she's going to have to dismiss the false charges she brought against Amelia. Kilika asks what makes him think the charges are false, so Oda explains that he knows Amelia isn't the kind of person who would stoop as low as to poison a family member. Kilika realizes she isn't going to be able to convince Oda to hand Amelia over, so she orders all her guards to kill him immediately. However, before they could attack, the king of the Elf Nation shows up, and he orders them to put their weapons down. Kilika is shocked to see him here since he was supposed to be away on an inspection trip for the next few months, but he says something came up, so he returned earlier than expected. He demands to know what Kilika is doing out here, and before she can say anything, all the guards come to her defense and tell the king she did nothing wrong. The king immediately realizes that she must have used her mesmerized skill to put the guards under her control, so he orders her to release them at once, and then she walks over to Amelia to apologize. He has no idea what her sister must have put her through, but he assures her that Kilika will be punished for her actions. After that, he turns to Oda and orders him to leave immediately because there's no reason for a human to be on elf land. Amelia tries to stand up for Oda and tells her father that he was the one who saved her and brought her back here. However, while the king is grateful that Oda brought Amelia back to him, he still doesn't like humans in general, so he tells Oda to leave regardless. In that case, Amelia says she's going to leave as well, but the king becomes angry and says there's no way he would let that happen. Amelia is the only one he trusts to rule the kingdom once he is gone, so he won't let her leave, but Oda tells him it's Amelia's choice to make. The king orders Oda to stay out of this because it's none of his business, but Oda isn't one of the king's subjects, so he has no reason to obey those commands. In fact, he says he is more than willing to make the king listen to him with force, and judging by what Oda did to Liam on the floor over there, the king can tell that he's not bluffing. With that said, the king has never been one to duck a fade, so he issues a challenge to Oda under the condition that the loser has to obey the winner's commands, and Oda accepts. So the king says the duel will be held at the base of the holy tree in accordance with their tradition. As they walk toward the tree, Amelia apologizes to Oda for dragging him into this mess, but he says there's nothing to apologize for because he's the one who chose to get himself involved. Changing topics, he recalls Kilika referring to Amelia as a child of blight, so he asks her what that's all about. Amelia explains that there's an old elven legend that says whenever a set of twins are born, one will differ from their parents, and this child is said to bring calamity upon the land, hence they are referred to as a child of blight. People used to kill the odd twin at birth because of this, and Knight is surprised to hear that elves still believe it despite the fact that the legend was proven to be mere superstition long ago. Amelia says it usually isn't an issue anymore, but Kilika has been bringing it up a lot lately since her eye and hair color are different from that of the rest of her family. It's pretty obvious that Kilika was just using that as an excuse to alienate Amelia, and personally Oda says he thinks Amelia's hair and eyes are beautiful. They eventually arrive at the holy tree, and since Kilika was the one who started this whole mess, she will be facing Oda in the duel. Before the match begins, Oda decides that he won't use his concealment skill since there would be no point in winning unless everyone clearly sees him do it. Amelia warns Oda that Kilika is the strongest swordsman among the elves, so facing her won't be easy, and he needs to be careful. Oda notices that Amelia seems to hold Kilika in high regard in spite of everything that has happened, so she explains that they used to be really close when they were little, and no matter what she does, Amelia will always see Kilika as her dear sister. As the match begins, Kilika draws her sword, but Oda chooses to fight with his sword still in its sheath. Kilika asks if he's trying to mock her by not taking the fight seriously, but Oda simply says he doesn't want to risk accidentally killing her during their fight. As soon as the match begins, Kilika charges at Oda and launches a succession of precise strikes aimed at his vitals, but Oda is able to dodge them all. He admits that Kilika certainly lives up to the title of strongest swordsman, but he is simply too fast for her, so he is able to slip past her attacks and shove her away. He tells Kilika to just surrender before she gets herself hurt, but she refuses to be looked down upon and activates her trump card. A torrent of wind begins to surround her blade as she sends a violent gust in Oda's direction. He has never seen anything like it before, so it catches him off guard for a moment, but he eventually manages to sidestep the blast. Knight recognizes Kilika's technique as buff magic, and Amelia explains that she is the only elf capable of using it, so she is trained with it to the point of near perfection. She is able to launch powerful wind attacks at will, so Oda is forced to run around a lot to avoid getting hit, but at one point he notices that Kilika looks really sad. He asks her why, and she tries to deny it, saying she's happier than she has ever been, but Oda says she looks miserable to him. Kilika doesn't want to listen to Oda's prying any longer, so she launches another attack at him, but he easily ducks underneath and legs sweeps her, sending her tumbling to the ground. By the time she gets up, Oda is already standing behind her and places his sword on her neck, showing that he could have killed her by now if he wanted to. He once again asks Kilika to just surrender and make peace with Amelia, but Kilika vehemently refuses. She says she would never make peace with someone who stole everything from her. She then flies into a rage and begins launching indiscriminate blasts of wind in all directions. She says she has nothing because Amelia and her divine nature took it all away from her. Kilika used to get along great with Amelia when they were younger, but then it was discovered that Amelia possessed the spirit medium class, and with that once mastered, she could become one of the strongest people on the continent, so from that day onward, nothing Kilika did was ever good enough. Amelia tries to tell her that that's not true, but Kilika is too upset to listen to reason right now. Just then, Liam approaches Amelia and asks her to help save Kilika with this, and she immediately understands what he's trying to do. She climbs onto Knight's back and uses the power of the holy tree branch Liam gave her to cast purification magic and release everyone from Kilika's mesmerized spell. This sends Kilika into an absolute frenzy, so she unleashes her most powerful wind blast yet, and Oda is forced to use his shadow magic to counter it. He is eventually able to overcome the force of her wind magic, knocking Kilika to the ground and causing her to lose the will to fight. Just then, Liam and Amelia walk over to check on her, and Kilika asks if they are here to mock her now that she has been defeated. Liam tells her that's not the case because he's actually worried about her, but she doesn't believe him since she thinks that as soon as the mesmerized spell wore off on him, he rushed straight to Amelia's side and helped her undo the rest. However, Amelia tells Kilika she's wrong because Liam was never actually under her spell. Kilika thinks Amelia is simply lying to her, so she says they should hurry up and exile or execute her already because she doesn't want to live like this anymore. But the king says if anyone should be punished, it is him because he's the one who caused Kilika to turn out this way. Kilika doesn't understand what he's talking about, so the king explains that he sealed away some of her memories a long time ago to protect her, but he now realizes that was a mistake. He undoes his forgetting skill, and all at once, Kilika's lost memories return to her. When she was little, Kilika had been training a lot near the dungeon, but one day a strange person showed up near the entrance and told her she could get stronger a lot faster if she used one of these balls. Kilika, being a naive child, grabbed the stranger's balls and ran into the dungeon to try them out. However, after using them, a horde of powerful monsters suddenly appeared, and she knew fighting them all on her own would be risky, so she ran out of the dungeon. Normally, dungeon monsters shouldn't be able to exit the dungeon, but these apparently weren't ordinary monsters, and at this rate, they were going to attack the elf village, so Kilika decided to stay and fight them off. She was holding her ground really well, and all the commotion alerted the other elves to the trouble, so backup had arrived. Leon was the first to get there, but unfortunately, he immediately got his torso impaled by a goblin, and Kilika had to watch her friend die right before her eyes. The trauma and guilt from what happened nearly broke Kilika's mind, so the king chose to seal away those painful memories to protect her from the truth. Leon wasn't the only one who died in that fight, but the situation was later salvaged thanks to Amelia using her spirit medium magic to craft 2 spells, gravity magic and resurrection magic. She was able to revive everyone who died, so there was no real loss that day, but since Kilika was the only one who was unaware of what happened, all those involved unintentionally grew distant from her, and she interpreted this as them losing interest because she wasn't a spirit medium like Amelia. Kilika breaks down in tears at the realization that she turned her own sister into an enemy over a stupid misunderstanding. But Amelia says that's not true because she could never truly hate Kilika. She's got a lot of apologizing to do to make up for all the trouble she caused Amelia, but at the end of the day, they will always be family, and in Amelia's eyes, nothing can change that. That night, a feast is held in celebration of Kilika changing her ways, and the king thanks Oda for helping resolve the matter. As promised, he agrees to let Amelia decide what she wants to do, even if that means she will be leaving on a journey with Oda. Speaking of which, the king asks Oda where he plans to head next, so he says he is heading for the Beast Continent since Knight mentioned that it's a great place to buy weapons and equipment. Meanwhile, Asahina and the rest of Oda's classmates all hop on a ship headed to the Beast Continent as well. They had originally planned to wait until Oda eventually shows up, but they've already grown strong enough that the monsters in the Yamano dungeon no longer give them experience. So rather than sit idle, they decided to head to the Beast Continent to upgrade their gear. The next morning, the Elf King prepares an escort to take Oda and Amelia to the edge of the kingdom so they can continue their journey. Oda thinks this is a little much, but the king says there have been a lot of kidnappings along the coast recently, so he just wants to ensure their safety. In fact, he says he would feel much better if Oda allowed them to escort him personally, but he turns down the king's offer immediately and agrees to just take the carriage. During the carriage ride, Oda asks Knight why she was so docile during the drama with the elves since she could definitely have done more to intervene, so she explains that she didn't want to reveal the fact that she's a demon since not everyone would be as accepting of her as he is. Oda understands why she would want to act like a regular cat, but he asks if the demon lord is okay with it since he might still be watching. Knight tells him he is correct about that as her eyes and ears are still linked to the demon lord so he can keep track of everything she does. However, he no longer has control over Knight's actions and she has no intention of betraying Oda. Oda is glad to hear that since he might end up butting heads with the demon lord when they finally meet, but Amelia doesn't think that's likely to happen. If anything, she gets the feeling that the demon lord wants to be friends with him, and Knight shares the same sentiment because the move Oda pulled off yesterday certainly piqued the demon lord's interest. Not many people are capable of utilizing shadow magic in combat, but Oda was able to fully coat himself in it. Oda says he just did it in the heat of the moment because he was worried that his shadow magic might consume Kilika, but even if it was unintentional, such a feat is still impressive. Just then, Oda senses something up ahead, so he tells the carriage driver to stop here and gets out. He tells everyone that his detection skill alerted him to some people further up the road, and after taking a look with a telescope, the driver confirms that there is indeed a group of bandits up ahead. Unfortunately, the bandits also notice them, and they have an elf hostage in their custody, so they threaten to kill her if Oda and the others don't do exactly as they say. The group has no choice but to listen for now, so the bandits take out a bunch of rope and tell them all to tie themselves up. Just then, Amelia gets down from the carriage, and as soon as the bandits see her hair color, they get excited because they recognize her as one of the elf princesses, and if they offer her to Lord Graham, then they'll be sure to get a huge bonus. However, while the bandits are all snickering to themselves, Oda activates his presence concealment, and in an instant, he knocks all the bandits out before they even realize what's going on. He then asks the driver to tie up all the bandits with the rope they brought, and while he's doing that, Oda starts wondering who this Lord Graham person the bandits mentioned is. Fortunately, the driver says he has actually heard of Lord Graham before, so he informs Oda that Graham is a royal in the nation of Uruk. That's good enough of a tip for Oda, so he asks the driver to take the bandits back to the elf castle, and in the meantime, he and Amelia will continue their journey on foot. The driver starts to object since his orders were to escort Oda and Amelia all the way to the port, but they are already pretty close, so Oda says getting there won't be a problem for them. A little while later, Oda, Amelia, and Knight all hop on a boat, and once they arrive at their destination, Oda plans to get himself some new gear so he can level up even more. Amelia is a bit surprised that Oda wants to get even stronger when he is already so powerful, but he says he needs to keep improving if he plans to avenge Saren eventually. Knight mentions that the port city they are headed to has a labyrinth in it, so if Oda wants, he can level up once they get there. However, that's going to take at least a few days, so she says they should just sit back and enjoy the journey until then. Amelia is excited since this is her first time traveling by ship, and she says she's excited to watch the sunset with Oda, but when she turns to ask him what he thinks, she realizes that he wasn't paying attention to a single word she said. He is busy reading a book that Amelia's father gave him as a parting gift, and he is so engrossed in it that he barely notices Amelia pouting at him. Oda spends the entire ship ride reading his book, so by the time they arrive on the Beast Folk continent, Amelia has barely been able to spend any time with him. As they get off the boat, Oda notices that humans are the only ones doing the manual labor here, which seems a little odd, but after taking a few steps into the city, he is confronted by a group of beastmen who order him to leave Amelia behind and get out of here. He realizes that the beast folk here must look down on humans, and dealing with these clowns could turn into a huge hassle, so he asks Amelia to stand back and let him handle this. He begins walking towards the beastmen, and they all begin mocking Oda because there's no way a puny human could possibly stand up to their strength, but even though Oda could easily beat them up, he opts for the more classy option and uses his shadow magic to blind them instead. He then leads Amelia past the goons, but as they walk into town, he notices that a lot of the people here are staring at them, and their gaze seems to be aimed at Knight. Knight explains that cats are despised and feared here. Later that night, they check into a hotel, and after having a hearty meal, Oda suggests they should head to bed. The room has 2 beds, but with a flushed face, Amelia says they are so big that she and Oda could probably just share one. Hearing this catches Oda off guard, but Knight knows exactly what Amelia is trying to do, so she decides to head out to give her and Oda some privacy. Oda tries to convince Knight to come back, but she's already long gone, and Amelia announces that she's going to take a shower, so he doesn't know what to do. By the time Amelia returns in a nightgown, she finds Oda using the advanced technique of pretending to be asleep. She assumes he must just be exhausted from the long journey, so she decides to hold off on her planned activities and just climbs into bed next to him to get some sleep. The next morning, Knight returns to the room, and when she sees Oda and Amelia in bed together, she assumes they must have had some fun after all. But that's besides the point. She tells them that a guest will be arriving soon, so they need to get dressed. A little while later, there's a knock at the door, so Oda tells the visitor he can enter, and a man named Crow walks in. Knight explains that Crow is the best blacksmith on the continent. She met with him last night and asked him to come here. Normally, Crow would never accept requests like this, but since the Nightmare of Adelia personally came to make the request, he couldn't refuse. Amelia wonders what Crow meant when he referred to Knight as the Nightmare of Adelia, but there's no time to ask about it because Crow asks Oda to hand over his weapon so he can inspect it. He can tell that Oda probably overused this thing in a labyrinth recently with all the damage it has accumulated, and Amelia is impressed that he can see all that from just a glance. Oda asks if Crow is going to be able to repair it, and Crow says that with the right materials and budget, he should be able to get it done. Oda also asks if he could make roughly 20 throwable assassin knives, but Crow looks surprised to learn that Oda is an assassin. He composes himself and tells Oda that he probably doesn't have the experience to properly use weapons forged by him, and Amelia gets offended by the fact that Crow is calling Oda inexperienced, but Oda can't exactly deny it. Knight asks Amelia to calm down because while Crow may be a smith right now, he was once a member of the hero party, so when it comes to combat, he knows what he's talking about. Crow meant what he said about Oda being inexperienced, but he still agrees to forge the weapons Oda asked for, so he writes down a list of all materials Oda will need to gather, and in the meantime, he's going to hold onto Oda's sword to make sure he doesn't damage it any further. Crow taking Oda's sword was a bit unexpected, but Knight assures him that Crow is the best there is, so Oda's weapon is in safe hands. Oda takes Knight's word for it, but even if Crow can fix the sword, Oda has no idea where to get all the materials he asked for. Knight tells him that the easiest option would be to hunt for them in this city's labyrinth, and it would give Oda a chance to level up as well, so he thinks the idea is perfect. The labyrinth in the city is located near the center, but access is limited based on one's rank as an adventurer. Oda doesn't think that will be much of a problem for him, so he begins making plans for the hunt, but while he's doing that, Amelia asks if it's alright for her to head out for a little bit since there's something she wants to talk to Crow about. Oda says he's fine with it since he still has a lot of research to do on the labyrinth here before he's ready to go in, but he asks Knight to go with her and contact him with telepathy if anything happens. A little while later, Amelia and Knight arrive at Crow's workshop, and Amelia mentions that she heard that when the previous hero party failed to kill the demon lord, only the hero and a beastman managed to survive, so that beastman must have been Crow. Crow tells her she's free to mock him for his failure if that's what she wants to do, but that wasn't Amelia's intention. She believes Crow managed to survive because he is strong, and that's why she would like him to teach her to fight. Crow immediately refuses because he decided long ago that he would never accept another apprentice. He says everyone whom he has tried to train would either run away or fall into severe depression. So he doesn't want to waste his effort, but Amelia assures him that she will neither give up nor break down. She wants to stand by Oda's side with her head held high, and to do that, she can't let the power gap between him and her grow any wider, so if Oda plans to grow stronger, then she wants to train as well. Crow once again refers to Knight as the Nightmare of Adelia and reminds her that the deal was that he would only accept the request to fix Oda's equipment. However, she points out Amelia is making the request on her own. And this has nothing to do with Oda. Furthermore, she says she would appreciate it if Crow stopped referring to her as the Nightmare of Adelia since her name is Knight now, and Amelia is curious. So she asks why Crow keeps referring to Knight that way. Knight explains that decades ago, the Demon Lord sent her to the city of Adelia in retaliation after the people had invaded the Demon Kingdom. Technically, Knight's job was just to issue a warning to the leaders of the city, but she was blinded by rage and kind of took things a bit too far, nuking the entire city in the process. She knows she had no reason to do all that, and she takes full responsibility for her actions, which is why she wanted Oda to kill her when they first met. However, she has changed since then, and as long as she is serving under Oda, the history will never repeat itself. Crow asks her if she really thinks it's that easy to turn over a new leaf, but Knight is well aware that the things she has done are unforgivable, so she understands if Crow still despises her. However, on the contrary, Crow says he never bore any resentment towards Knight. A few years ago, after he and the hero party failed to kill the Demon Lord, Crow was holding a memorial in front of his sister's grave when Knight happened to run into him. She immediately recognized Crow as one of the heroes who escaped the Demon Lord, and she could tell that he was mourning, so she told him that if he wanted to kill her, she wouldn't fight back. However, Crow told her that he knows she is nothing more than a tool the Demon Lord created to do his bidding, so blaming her would be the same as blaming the sword instead of the swordsman. In that case, Knight asks if he intends to go after the Demon Lord again, but Crow told her that it was neither her nor the Demon Lord who killed his sister. After Knight's attack, Crow's sister had been trying to help the people trapped under the rubble. However, at the same time, a nobleman was desperately trying to flee the city, and since Crow's sister was in the way, he decided to blast her to ashes instead of just going around. That's the man who took his sister from him. So Crow swore that if he was going to take revenge on anyone, it would be Lord Graham. However, he never ended up going through with it because he knew his gentle sister wouldn't want him to go down that path. Just then, Amelia speaks up and basically calls Crow a bitch for being too cowardly to take revenge for his sister. He just fabricated the idea that his sister wouldn't want this to justify running away from reality, and Amelia understands what he's going through better than anyone. She spent a lot of time lying to herself, claiming it was all for the sake of her sister, but Oda opened her eyes to how wrong she was about the situation. Amelia's words really struck a chord with Crow, and he needs some time to process his emotions, so he asks Amelia and Knight to leave him alone for today. Meanwhile, Odds is out in town doing some research on the labyrinth when all of a sudden, monsters erupt from the labyrinth and spill out onto the street. Amelia sees the chaos and tries to intervene, but she is confronted by a boy named Oram, and she recognizes him as the same person who tricked Kilika when they were kids. Oram says he has orders from the Demon Lord to keep Amelia alive since she can use interesting magic, so he surrounds her with monsters and takes her captive. By the time Oda arrives, Oram has already taken Amelia into the dungeon and plans to get her back, but first, he needs to clean up this mess, so he asks Knight to stand back. Knight realizes what he's about to do, so she takes off flying to leave the area, and Oda activates his shadow magic with no restrictions, allowing it to consume all the monsters in the area, but the strain on his body causes him to pass out afterwards. Knight flies down to check on Oda, but all of a sudden, the mysterious system in his body is triggered, and due to the excessive use of mana from Oda's body, it surrounds him with a shadow and puts him in recovery mode. Knight has no idea what's happening right now, but a few moments later, Oda's body is fully healed, but he is still unconscious, so by the time he finally wakes up, he finds himself in an unfamiliar bed. He asks Mike what happened, so she tells him he collapsed after using his shadow magic, so she brought him to Crow's house for safety, until he woke up. Oda asks how long it has been since he's worried he might have been asleep for 5 or 6 hours. However, Mike tells him he was actually unconscious for a full day and 5 hours. Oda is shocked to hear that, but Knight tells him it's not a surprising outcome, since using his shadow magic completely drained his body of all mana. He very well could have died from such a stunt, but for some reason, his shadow magic activated on its own while he was unconscious and completely replenished his mana. She still has no idea what that was all about, so she asks Oda for an explanation, but he is just as clueless as she is, and frankly, he isn't interested in finding out right now because he has more important things to worry about. He gets out of bed, and when he sees Crow, he thanks him for lending his bed while he was unconscious, but he really needs to get going now. Crow understands what's going through Oda's mind right now, so he asks him if he's sure it's a good idea to rush in like this. A full day has passed, so for all he knows, they might have already taken Amelia all the way to the Demon Continent by now. Without hesitation, Oda says if that's true, then he will just have to go to the Demon Continent to get her. But Crow asks him how he intends to face demons without any weapons. Oda yells that he will figure something out since he doesn't have his weapons right now, But the crow points to the table over there, which has all of Oda's repaired weapons laid out and ready for battle. Those have been here the entire time, and the fact that Oda did notice them is proof that he isn't paying attention to his surroundings. So Crow tells him to calm down and think things through. Oda realizes Crow is right, so he calms down and goes over to check on his weapons. Crow split his sword into 2 blades, since short swords are easier for an assassin to use, but it costs him a lot in materials and labor, so he expects Oda to pay him back as soon as he is done saving Emilia. There's also one more thing Crow wanted to give him, so he throws Oda an old ring which has the words, "I will lead you anywhere," inscribed on it. The ring was apparently forged by a previous hero, and it is enchanted with magic that will lead the wearer to whatever it is that they desire. Oda tests it out while thinking of Emilia, and a red line shoots out from the ring in the direction of the labyrinth. It wouldn't have gone in that direction if Emilia had been taken to the demon continent, so for whatever reason, Alum must still be holding Emilia captive inside the labyrinth. He isn't sure where in the labyrinth exactly, but knowing that Emilia is still in there is good enough for Oda, so he puts on his equipment and heads out the door with Knight. As they are heading towards the labyrinth, Knight asks Oda to please refrain from pulling stunts like what he did the other day. Oda apologizes since he now remembers that if he dies, Knight also dies, and he should have taken that into account before using such a risky move, so he promises to be smarter about things like that in the future. Meanwhile, deep in the labyrinth, Alum has placed Emilia on some broken pillars, and he is pleased with how well things have been going so far. He tells her demons like him have magic that allows them to control monsters, but he has never had a chance to try it on a humanoid species before, so he was excited to see what effect it would have on her. It turns out he can't control Emilia, but the spell did immobilize her, so that makes it easy for him to keep her under control. With a strained voice, Emilia asks him why they are still in the labyrinth, and Alum is bored, so he decides to sit down and talk to her for a little bit. He explains that only second-rate demons are capable of using teleportation magic, and he's only a third-rate demon, so he has to wait for his boss to get here before they can teleport Emilia back with them. Emilia asks where exactly he intends to teleport her, but Alum says he has no idea, and he assures her that he isn't lying. He knows Emilia is trying to extract information from him, but he doesn't mind since even if that assassin friend of hers shows up to rescue her, Alum is sure Oda won't be able to beat him. That said, he tells Emilia he has no intentions of killing her, so she doesn't need to worry about that. Alum has strict orders to present Emilia to the Demon Lord alive and well, so he won't let anything bad happen to her. Meanwhile, outside, Oda has just arrived in front of the labyrinth, and according to the ring, Emilia is definitely down there, so he tells Knight to hurry. However, before they could head inside, a girl calls out to Oda and asks him to let her help rescue Emilia from the labyrinth. Oda recognizes her as the girl he met during the hero parade, but he never told her that Emilia was inside the labyrinth, so he grabs her by the throat and demands that she explain how she got that information. He warns her that whether he spares her life or not depends on her answer, so she had better not lie. While gasping for air, the girl tells him that she used her scent tracking skill to follow Emilia's smell to this location, and the trail disappeared at the entrance, so she assumed that Emilia must be in there. Oda doesn't seem convinced, but Knight tells him that it is normal for beast folk to awaken his scent tracking skill, so what she's saying could be true. Oda decides to let her go for now, so he drops the girl to the floor and demands to know why she is here. After regaining her composure, the girl tells Oda that her name is Laya Lagoon and she is the first princess of the nation of Uruk. She received word that the Demon Lord was targeting Princess Emilia, so she was going to warn them. If that's the case, then Oda asks why she didn't warn him as soon as he and Emilia arrived in town, but she says she wasn't sure they would believe her without proof, so she planned to investigate and find more evidence, but by then, the demons had already attacked. Oda can't tell whether Laya is telling the truth or not, so he decides to use his scan skill to check. From what he sees, you can tell that Laya isn't lying, but he does notice a peculiar skill in her stat window, so he asks her what her spirit barrier skill does. Laya asks how Oda knows about her skill, but he tells her he's the one asking questions here, so she explains that normal barriers can usually only be used in one spot, but her spirit barrier can be applied to moving objects. Oda asks if that means she can apply barriers to people, and Laya confirms it, so he thinks she would be a useful asset in saving Emilia. Laya also tells him that the Demon Lord is after Emilia because he wants to get his hands on her resurrection magic, and after hearing that, Oda realizes how serious the situation is, so he tells Laya to get on Knight with him because there's no time to waste. Meanwhile, down in the labyrinth, Alum has just told Emilia that the Demon Lord is after her resurrection magic, but she doesn't understand why. Demons already have practically infinite lifespans and they don't die easily. They'd have no real use for resurrection magic. Personally, Alum doesn't understand it either since resurrection magic doesn't work on people who have been dead for too long, and once it has been used, you can't use it again for several days, so its applications are pretty limited. Emilia is surprised that Alum knows so much about her resurrection magic, but he changes the subject and points out that once he kills Oda, Emilia won't be able to revive him since she already used her magic to revive herself after that fatal blow she took. He's really excited to see what kind of expression Emilia makes when she sees Oda's lifeless body hit the floor, and he wonders if it will be as good as the look of horror he saw on Kilika's face back then. Back on the surface, on their way into the dungeon, Oda asks Leia what she was doing in the kingdom of Redis when he first met her, so she explains that her family was abducted by black slime, so she was looking for them there. Oda is surprised to hear that a black slime kidnapped Leia's family since Emilia also had an encounter with a black slime, but he doesn't know if those two events are related. Leia goes on to state that she was adopted by the royal family of Uruk, but before that, she used to live in a remote village. One day, a black slime suddenly appeared, and even though slimes are usually monsters that can be taken down with one hit, this one swallowed up Leia's father, mother, little brother, and all the villagers in a single day. No ordinary slime could have done that, so she is sure that someone modified it and released it into the wild. After everyone Leia knew had been taken by the slime, the royal family offered to adopt her since they saw value in her skills as a protector, so she accepted and soon became Uruk's princess. She used her authority to look into the slime incident, and the trail ended up leading her to Redis, which is where she met Oda the first time. During her search, she found out that her village wasn't the only one that was attacked, and that a large number of humans, beast folk, and a few elves had gone missing in similar incidents. Their lives were consumed as part of a summoning ritual, and Leia later found out that the ritual in question was the one that summoned the heroes. So she was watching the parade that day to get a good look at the faces of the people her family was sacrificed for. Oda asks her if she holds any resentment towards him for what happened, but she says she knows he and the other heroes aren't to blame for what happened. Her hatred is directed at the king and princess for killing the people she loved for their personal gain, and Oda also has a score to settle with them, so he and Leia have something in common. While they are on the topic of the summoning ritual, Oda tells Leia that he doesn't believe that the king actually summoned them to fight against the demon lord, and Knight tells him he's right to not believe it because it's a bold-faced lie. The demon continent hasn't attempted an attack on humanity in the past 100 years, and they have shown no signs of doing so either, so the king's claim of needing to summon heroes to fight back is complete bull. The group eventually arrives inside the labyrinth, and the way things work here is that you must defeat a certain number of monsters on each floor before you will be allowed to progress to the next. Oda says he can use his shadow magic to take care of the monsters quickly, but Knight tells him he can't do that. He's going to have to fight a demon when they find Emilia, so it's a bad idea to risk exhausting himself before they get there. But Oda says they have no other choice since Leia can't fight, and he's the fastest one here. Knight tells him she can fight in his place, and if she goes into battle mode, she should be able to tear through the monsters on each floor in no time, but there's a risk of her losing control to her instincts in that form, so she's worried she might hurt Oda or Leia. Oda looks at Knight and assures her that as long as he is here, he will make sure she doesn't lose control, so Knight decides to put her faith in him. Knight then unleashes her full power and begins rampaging through the labyrinth with Oda and Leia on her back. And to make sure she doesn't lose control, Oda is using their mental link to keep her calm. Since they've got time, he asks her why demons are so hated in the first place, so Knight explains that the first demons generally aren't bad people, but the first demon king did order an attack on the other nations, so ever since then, people have held disdain for demons. Some demons are genuinely evil and see other races as nothing but bugs to be crushed, but at the same time, there are demons who wish to live in peace and avoid bloodshed, so she asks Oda to remember that not all demons are the same. Before long, they arrive at the floor where Emilia is being held captive, and as soon as they arrive, Leia applies a barrier to both Oda and Emilia. Alum is surprised that Oda managed to make it here so quickly, and Akira says he will be taking Emilia back now, but Alum laughs and asks how he plans to do that when he is going to be dead soon. Oda immediately tries to blindside Alum, but his attack is parried and Alum begins pushing him back and occasionally stabbing his limbs. It is clear that he is toying with Oda because he knows he is much stronger than him, but Oda still has one trick left up his sleeve. He activates his shadow magic and uses the blood stains on the ground to summon shadow beasts to aid him in battle. Alum wasn't expecting this, so he is quickly overwhelmed by the beasts, and that gives Oda a chance to get close while his guard is down and slash both his arms and legs, leaving him severely wounded. As a last-ditch effort, Alum used his magic to summon the labyrinth monsters he had control over to attack Oda while he was recovering from the backlash of using shadow magic. Leia cast an inverted spirit barrier around him before the monsters attacked, redirecting their blasts back at them. Now, Alum had no cards left to play, so he was completely at Oda's mercy. But even though Oda knew that the smart thing to do was to kill him, he couldn't bring himself to do it because Alum looked so similar to a human. He ended up hesitating for so long that Alum's boss had time to show up, and he has no idea what to do now because if he was struggling so much against Alum, who's a third-grade demon, there's no way he can handle a second-grade one. Knight warns Oda that he needs to avoid facing the demon head-on at all costs. He can already tell that this guy is on a whole other level, so he needs to be really careful about how he handles this. The demon can see that Alum is no longer able to fight, so he uses his power to rack him up and throws him to the back of the room so he doesn't get in the way. He then wraps a ribbon around the group and it immediately shatters the barrier that Leia had set up to protect them, and she can't believe he was able to do it so easily. She tries getting up to create another barrier, but Oda tells her to get back since it's too dangerous. The demon says that's the smart thing to do here since he has no business with her, but he does have business with Emilia, so he launches another ribbon straight at her, sending Emilia flying into a wall. Oda rushes to her side to check on her, but the demon tells him there's no cause for alarm because she's still alive. He just made it so she wouldn't be able to move for a while. Oda glares at him with murderous intent, but as much as he wants to attack the guy for hurting Emilia, he knows he can't win, so he starts thinking of a way to escape instead. However, the demon catches on to Oda's intentions, and it would be really exhausting to have to chase Oda through the dungeon, so he decides to seal off all the exits. Now, Oda's only option here is to fight, but he already used shadow magic once, so he's running low on energy, and with how strong the demon seems, he doubts presence concealment would work on him. Just then, the demon asks Oda if his name is written as the one from Nobunaga Oda, or the one that means rice field since he wants to get it right. But Oda is too stunned to answer the question because the only way the demon would know about the difference is if he was also from Japan, and he confirms it. He tells Oda his name is Mahiro Abe, and though his situation was a little different from that of Oda, he was also brought here from Japan. It would have been nice if he could have met Oda under different circumstances, but right now, Mahiro's mission is to capture Emilia, and he's going to have to kill Oda to do that. He activates his power and sends several energy blasts in Oda's direction, but while Oda does his best to dodge, Mahiro has full control over these things, so he makes one turnaround mid-air and strike Oda in the shoulder. Dodging isn't going to work, so Oda tries to close the distance so he can use his swords. However, he wasn't fast enough to land any hits on Mahiro, and a moment later more energy blasts are shot at him. Trying to evade them would be pointless, so instead, Oda activates a limited version of shadow magic to absorb the blasts across his body. Mahiro is intrigued since he has never seen that kind of magic before, but he can't tell that Oda is running low on mana, so he can't use it at full strength. Just then, Night calls out to Oda and tells him that she has finally regained a bit of her strength, so she can help now. Mahiro recognizes Night and asks her if she is officially switching sides now, so she confirms that she has no intention of returning to the service of the Demon Lord, and then she speaks to Oda through their mental link and tells him he needs to nullify their contract immediately. Oda has no idea what she's talking about, so Night explains that she has a way to take Mahiro down, but she's going to perish in the process, and as long as she remains linked to Oda, that means he would die as well. She urges him to undo the contract so she can sacrifice herself for him, but Oda flatly refuses. Mahiro can see that Oda and Night are having a conversation and he could attack them right now, but he's curious about what they're talking about, so he decides to wait until they are done. Oda tells Night that he didn't think he could win earlier, but now that she's here, they might have a shot at beating Mahiro if they work together, so there's no need for her to sacrifice. Night tells him that there's no guarantee that they will be able to win against Mahiro, so this plan is incredibly risky, but Oda says he's willing to take that risk if it means Night gets to survive. Night doesn't like the fact that Oda is putting himself in so much danger for her sake, but she respects his decision, so she uses the last of her energy to begin her transformation. As the golden light dissipates, Oda discovers that Night has transformed into a copy of Captain Saren, and while in this form, she has access to all of Saren's abilities, but she can't hold it for long, so she tells Oda they need to finish this quickly. She activates Saren's magic, creating a massive light hammer in the air, forcing Mahiro to cast his shield to defend himself, but the light also happens to strengthen the power of Oda's shadows, so he seizes the opportunity and covers himself in shadows to boost his attack power before striking Mahiro. Night soon joins Oda in pushing Mahiro back, and he is starting to get overwhelmed by the constant strikes, so Oda is able to land a slash across his back. Night warns Oda that her transformation is going to wear off soon, but Oda says it doesn't matter since he should be able to finish Mahiro off with his next attack anyway. However, Mahiro still has one trick up his sleeve, so he snaps his fingers, and in the next second, Emilia shows up behind Oda and stabs him through the chest with her hand. She was under Mahiro's control just now, and as soon as the effects wears off, she screams out in horror because she can't believe what she just did. Oda tries to assure her that this isn't her fault and he knows she would never hurt him intentionally, but it doesn't change the fact that he is currently bleeding out. He keeps trying his best to stay alive, saying he can't die until he has achieved his goals, but a moment later, the color fades from his eyes and Oda's body goes cold. However, just as Oda's heart is about to stop beating, the system in his body recognizes that his injuries are fatal, so it intervenes and activates healing mode. Energy begins emanating from Oda's body as the system begins healing him, and Mahiro sees this happening, so he tries to double-tap Oda to make sure he stays down. But the system has already put up an impenetrable barrier, so Mahiro's attack can't harm Oda right now. Once the healing is complete, Oda's body begins to rise, but he isn't the one in control right now. The system has determined that Mahiro is a serious threat to Oda's survival, so it goes into battle mode and charges right at him. Oda and Mahiro clash, but with the system in control, Oda is able to use shadow magic much more efficiently. So when Mahiro attempts to hit him with an emergency slash, he creates a shadow wall to defend himself and then uses those shadows to bind Mahiro in place. The system then warns him to undo the spell he cast on Emilia and leave at once if he wants to live, but Mahiro refuses to accept defeat and instead decides to target Emilia to force Oda to sacrifice himself for her. The system doesn't really care about Emilia all that much, but Oda does, and the thought of her in danger is enough to snap him back to consciousness. So he runs over to Emilia to protect her with his body, but just as the spikes were about to hit him, Mahiro's magic is suddenly dispelled and the one responsible is Crow. He came down here because he was worried about Oda, and it looks like he arrived just in time. My hero is surprised to see Crow again since he thought he had died decades ago, but Crow is clearly alive and well, and my hero doesn't want to risk fighting him right now, so he decides to withdraw from now and creates a teleportation circle so he can leave with Alum. Oda is relieved that it's finally over and that Amelia is still safe, but all the strain on his body finally catches up to him, so he passes out, and by the time he wakes up, 3 days have passed. Amelia and Knight has been waiting for him to wake up this entire time, and they are really glad that he is alright. A little while later, once Crow realizes Oda is awake, he comes to check on him, and he has a few guests with him who want to see him as well. To Oda's surprise, he realizes the guests are his classmates, and they knew Oda was here because Jill has apparently known Crow for a long time. So when they came here looking to upgrade their gear, he informed them of Oda's presence. He's really happy that they were able to break free from the king's curse and leave the castle. They tell him that Jill was the one who helped break all their curses, for which they are all thankful. But speaking of Jill, Oda asks if it's really alright for him to be here since he'd probably get in trouble for leaving the castle. However, Jill says there's no need to worry about that since he was fired from being a knight already. The king thought the knight's order was hindering his plans, so he just got rid of them, and that sounds exactly like something the king would do. Asahina tells Oda he has been looking forward to reuniting with him, and he asks if Oda would like to join them, but Knight immediately objects. She says she is the only partner Oda needs, but Asahina tells her to shut up because Oda can speak for himself. Oda tells everyone to calm down for a second, because before he decides whether to join them or not, he'd like to know what they plan to do after this. Tsukasa explains that they were thinking of going after the Demon Lord soon, but Knight scoffs at them and says they are nowhere near strong enough to challenge the Demon Lord yet. Yuki gets offended by Knight calling them weak and asks why she's picking on them so much. Oda kind of agrees with Knight's opinion on them being too weak, but she isn't helping with the conversation right now, so he asks her to leave for a minute so he can finish talking with everyone. Once Knight is gone, he asks them why they want to go after the Demon Lord in the first place, so Tsukasa explains that doing so would raise their influence, and then they might be able to negotiate with the King of Regis to get him to send them home. After all, if he summoned them here in the first place, he must know of a way to send them back. It sounds like a good plan in theory, but Oda has a few problems with it, like for one, what on earth made them think it would be possible to negotiate with a man who tried to mind control a bunch of teenagers and killed Saren for his own selfish goals? Even if the king does know of a way to send them back, Oda isn't willing to do anything involving him, especially since he knows the king sacrificed hundreds of innocent people to summon them here in the first place. In that case, the others ask Oda what he intends to do since he must want to return home as well, so he tells them that the demon Mahiro is able to create teleportation circles, so he might know something that can help get them home, and Oda will eventually infiltrate the Demon Lord's castle to make him talk, but before that, he has to avenge Saren's death. Afterwards, he will do whatever it takes to make it back home, but hearing Oda say that makes Amelia feel conflicted since she wants Oda to succeed, but she also doesn't want him to leave her behind. It's a lot to process, so she leaves the room to get some fresh air, and Oda goes after her. He finds Amelia at the edge of a cliff near the water, and she tells him she already knows they will have to go their separate ways one day, but it's not easy for her to accept it. She tells him there's something she needs to apologize for, and Oda tries to say he doesn't blame her for what happened in the dungeon since Mahiro was controlling her, but there's more to it than that. Amelia felt absolutely terrible for hurting him, but for a brief moment, she was actually happy about it because the thought crossed her mind that once Oda returns to his world, he would likely forget all about her, but if he were to die at her hands, then at least he would never forget her. She knows it was a messed up thing to think, and Oda doesn't really know what to say to that, but he does know what his feelings about Amelia are. He tells her that in his world, when a man and woman make a vow to spend the rest of their lives together, they wear a ring on their fourth finger, but he doesn't have a ring right now, so instead he hands Amelia his sword and cuts a ring around his finger. He then tells Amelia he loves her, and if she's okay with it, he would like to become her partner for the rest of his life. Amelia is overjoyed and responds, telling Oda she loves him as well. She then cuts the same ring on her finger to seal their vow to be together, and Oda asks her if there's anything she wants him to do for her. Amelia takes his hand and says she just wants him to promise that he won't die, he won't forget, and he will never leave her. Oda swears that he will do everything in his power to keep those promises, and the two share a beautiful kiss as the sun rises. This was the end of episode 7. Subscribe to not miss the next part.